help us to all grow together. And we pray these things in the name of your Son. Amen. Okay, so we will not be studying Amos as we were with Daryl, but he asked me to kind of do a one-off departure, a little bit of break from the minor prophets. So we're going to talk about worship this evening. We'll start out very broadly, but we'll get narrowed down a little bit, maybe about a third of the way into it. Tonight's going to be mostly kind of question and discussion, so please feel ready to speak up. And I have some kind of guidelines or things to keep in mind for class tonight. Our focus is on worship is on the communal worship at the church, so be thinking about us as a group here at Issaquah, not anywhere else. And then the second thing up there, try to answer questions with some of the thoughts that first come to mind. I like doing this sometimes because sometimes I think the things that first pop into our heads, they might not be the right answer. We might know what we think the right answer is. And so we adjust what we say, but it's not, I think that we have more discussion and maybe it's more from the heart if we speak to what the things that first pop into our heads. And so there's not right or wrong answers tonight. I want us to discuss and the goal is to promote and encourage our worship as a whole together. And so we need that discussion together to get our thoughts out. So that's what the goal is, grow as worshipers. And connected with that, explore how our worship as individuals impacts our worship in the group. So to get us started off with, then when you think about worship, what's the first thing that you think of?
Praising God.
Praising God, okay, excellent.
When we come here,
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Family, okay. Could you maybe...
My brothers and sisters in Christ.
Okay. And how that relates to our worship of God. Okay, good. Anybody else have?
I think of the flock.
The flock, okay. And that's kind of like the brothers and sisters and family. It's a different aspect of that. Yeah. Okay. I like where you guys' heads are at. My head goes to what was ingrained in me growing up was the 5 acts of worship, and that worship is categorized into things like singing and praying, the Lord's Supper, and it's very checklist type of mentality. I think you guys' heads are already in a better spot than mine was, but this is an example of what I was talking about with what first comes to mind. If I'm going to seriously talk about what I think worship is, I'm not going to say that it's a checklist of the items, but that's still, because it's so ingrained in me, that's what initially, when I think of worship, I think, oh, there's these 5 acts of worship, and that's what we should have all of them in any given worship service. And that's not exactly the case, and so I think we're going to get into that somewhat tonight. So when you think of improving at worship, what is it that you think of?
We got to remember who the audience is. That's God.
Excellent. And so that is like the absolute core foundation of any discussion of worship. When I was looking at definitions and things of worship in preparation for class, in Greek and Hebrew and the words used for worship, some of them use the same word that's used to describe worshiping God, but it can also be bowing down before somebody else, and just an expression of reverence to somebody else sometimes. Sometimes in the English language we say that we kind of metaphorically worship something, but it's not the same as with God. And so it's where are we placing that foundational core of our worship. And so that changes how we think about what we are improving at.
Well, that's an interesting statement, improving worship versus improving at worship. right? The individual, as an individual, I am worshiping, but improving at worship is how do I help the collective?
Excellent. So, yeah, so I'm glad you picked up on that, because that I have that italicized there, improving at worship, and so that's like I want to talk about that tonight. And that's not to say that we're doing a bad job, but I think that this is the sort of thing that we should be actively, like every time we gather together and we're worshiping God, is this where our head's at? Are we doing our absolute all to worship God the best we can? And are we open to getting better and better at that? Right, Tony?
For me, when I think about a worship service where I just really was helped and felt like I could really concentrate better, I think of times when we really concentrate on how wonderful God is, and we get to the point where we just can't even express it, and you'll just hear the wows or amens or things where people are just like, it's incredible to even think about it. You can't really, just can't put it in a category almost. It's so wonderful. Daryl helps us with that a lot when he does the, I don't know what to say, it's just so great. And so that helps me. And I really am encouraged by amens when I hear participation in the audience during sermons or songs.
Excellent. So that, and we're going to talk more about, I think, what you're discussing here. But there is a sense where it's hard to put in sometimes into words when our hearts and minds are truly in that state of worship. Because I believe that worship ultimately is a state that we put ourselves in. That sometimes there's not really the right word. Go ahead.
A lot of times it's a quiet time where you're not really thinking, you are in peace, and you are really relishing the quietness and the love, because you feel it from the Lord, because He's right here with us.
Yes.
We bring him to us really when we're in worship.
Yes. Yeah. So excellent. So that's an active, even though it's a quiet, peaceful, and it's not necessarily obvious outwardly, it is an active engagement with God. Steve, yeah.
So this is saying what Tony said and what Arlene said, but maybe in a little different way, but it's a personal experience. So several years ago, we had a lady that worshiped with us for a while, and she came from a very different religious background. But she was here with us, and she was a part of us, and it was good. But it was not unusual for her in the middle of a song or whatever to raise her hands. And of course, in the churches I grew up in, that was like, oh my goodness, do you see what that person just did?
Yeah, same, yeah.
I mean, oh my goodness, but I found what she was doing very refreshing. You could tell that she was into the connection she had with what was going on. When she was singing the song, I mean, she was in it. And I found, even though it's like, oh my goodness, we don't do that around here, I found her connecting at that level very refreshing. I really did.
Yeah.
So it's, customarily, we just don't do that.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
But we read about things like that in the Bible, that the different states that you put yourself in physically, whether it's lifting hands or kneeling or bowing down. Amanda and I, when we visited Ireland, because I think because of the influence of the Catholic Church there, so many people coming out of the Catholic Church into Christianity. But when they pray, everybody gets up and turns around and kneels on the ground. And like again, for us, that was like, what is happening? But there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and it was refreshing in a sense to be like, I'm putting myself in physically in a worshipful state to worship God. I think, Robert, did you have something? And then Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the worship and being part of this is kind of echo what's been said, but for me it's that drawing closer to God or drawing closer to those that we're in fellowship with. That's part of what worship is about.
Yes, so again, that's addressing that connection. There's a connection. Like this is an active engagement between us, like between each other, and an active engagement between us and God. Peter.
I take a different angle of it. I look at the seasons of the year, and I see the blossoms coming out, everything repeating itself so perfectly, food being produced for every creature. I'm in awe of God. That to me is worship.
Yes.
And I always thank God as I drive, as I perceive all these things around me. To me, that is worship.
Yes. It's okay. So, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. But yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. Okay. So now, I mentioned that in my mind, that I think of acts of worship. One of those things is singing, and I don't think there's any disagreement there. I think singing, we'd probably all agree, singing to God is a form of worship. It's one of the things we do. But when I ask you, when you think about improving at singing, what do you think of?
Really hearing what the song says. I mean, and I've had these conversations over the years. There's certain songs where I have a hard time singing them because I don't think the tune sets the right tenor for the words that are being said.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and by the way, anybody who likes the song I'm going to mention, I'm sorry, and you can like it and love it, and that's okay. But I don't get Hebrew at all. I don't get it because we're not talking. This is not a ditty, right? This is not. This is significant. This has gravity to it, right? And yet Hebrew at all is
Right. Yeah. It's kind of happy and peppy feeling.
Right. And so I think that there's so much power in the words, and that's in the Old Testament. That's what they did with the Psalms, right? The Psalms, and they were good Psalms. They were happy Psalms, right? But they had meaning to them, and they kind of have that cadence. Anyway.
Okay. So, improving at singing, an aspect of that is our connection with the words. Okay. Anybody else? Improving at singing. What do you think of?
Something you've mentioned several times is just that emotional connection.
Okay.
And making sure that we really are connected to the words we're singing emotionally as well.
Great. Yeah. And spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about that tonight. But yeah, Arlene, go ahead.
There are certain songs that we have in our minds, and we have certain developments that happen in our life. Those songs sometimes come to your mind, and they're part of your worship, because that one that says, oh no, now my head's gonna.
Now you're on the spot and trying to remember words.
Because he lives, we can face tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because he lives, all fear is gone.
Yes.
That helps your heart
Yeah.
have that relationship with God, because you're going through something and you need his help.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
that's almost a cry for help.
Yeah. So that's speaking to that emotion and again that connection to God in our worship. Steve.
One of the traps that's easy for us to fall into is to get very rote in our service Sunday by Sunday by Sunday.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can get in here and sit and sing for 2 or 3 or 4 songs, and if somebody asked you 10 minutes later, what songs did you sing? You kind of don't know because it was just da-da-da-da-da-da, prayer, da-da-da-da, Lord's Supper, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
It's kind of like, what did you eat last night for dinner? Was dinner just a,
Right.
automatic activity?
So every once in a while, I will intentionally reach back, because I coordinate the service every Sunday. Every once in a while, I'll reach back to the song leaders and intentionally ask them to break that up a little bit. Don't do 2 songs in a prayer. Do 3 or 4 songs in a prayer,
Yeah.
and then just maybe do 1, or in other words, break that bad word, that monotony up, that roteness. I think that improves our singing if it feels more spontaneous than, just like marching.
Yeah, it does, it kind of like applauding, marching along, if like
Yeah.
just, so you're hitting on, that's another aspect that I wanted to address a little bit later, is, because that's a physical thing that we do, right? That's not worship really to change up the order of service, but it's a physical activity of rearranging that's helping our mind
Yeah.
worship more effectively, yeah, Tony.
I think if we really want to improve our singing, one thing we can do is sit close together. You don't ever see a choir where they all sit far
Right.
apart,
Yeah.
together. I think if we really wanted to improve our singing, and I'm not complaining about our singing, I think our singing is great. And you don't want to hear my voice, but I think our being together would.
Right. Yeah. So and that goes along with what Steve said. That's another physical, concrete thing that we could do that could collectively help our worship. But it's not. I think the key here is like, where's our foundation at? Our foundation, it goes back to what Jim said earlier, that we are worshiping God. Like that's the core. And so if you're starting with that as the core, and then you're adding maybe some physical mechanisms to help our worship. But without God at the core and as the center of our thinking the whole time, then it just becomes a monotonous march. I think Robert or Chris.
But I think part of that is we've got to let go. I think we all want to sing as well as we can possibly sing.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. But we got to let go of the outcome. It's just like when we're learning new songs. Think about this. Whenever a new person comes in here who hasn't known church or hasn't known God, every song is new. Every single song is new. So when that song comes up that you don't know or that you're trying to figure out, guess what? You feel like a visitor,
Yeah.
right?
And it's
That's how
okay.
you feel. And so lean into it, right? Lean into it. Listen, sing the melody, just learn it, right? Take the time, but no, because a lot of times that's sort of churches of the past, right? Well, we don't sing the new songs on Sunday morning, right? Because that's like, well, they're new for the visitors.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, Robert, and then we'll go to the next question.
I like how you're trying to get us back to the purpose, right?
Yeah.
So, like Tony, you don't want me leading singing. My wife will vouch for me there. But, I know of individuals who couldn't carry a note, but you're sitting right next to them or they're behind you and they are out of tune, but man, are they singing out.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
It's an act of worship from the heart.
Yes.
And so all of us need to, not be timid and think that I shouldn't sing because I'm off key or whatever. I think it's important for us to join in the choir, right?
Yeah. So on that note, I think we become even if you're not good at singing, you can become just as focused on the physical act of singing as somebody who's super great at singing and that's all they're focused on, the beauty of their own voice. Because if you feel that you're terrible at singing and you know it, and all you're thinking about the whole time is, I can't sing, my voice sounds so bad, I'm distracting everybody else, then you're not worshiping God any better than the person who's just thinking about how good their voice sounds. So there's definitely two components there. And let me back up. So my answer to the question is, again, that first thing that comes to mind, and I think because that's how I grew up, it's very much focused on the mechanics of the congregational singing. So when I think of how do you improve at singing, I'm thinking about like you become a better singer, you become a better song leader. There's these physical mechanisms that you do. You learn music, learn more music, learn how to sight read music, or learn how to sing parts. Like there's all these very physical activities, and not that those are inherently bad, and we're going to talk about them some. But that's not the foundation core that we're we're addressing. Okay, so we're talking about improving at singing. What are the challenges that we would face to improve at singing? I think we've kind of talked around a lot of these, but maybe let's just call them out.
Just that confidence to try.
Great. Yeah.
Be heard. And when I hear my sisters singing, it's like it just inspires me to sing more. And I really appreciate it.
Right. And I think we tell internally, our internal critic, we tell ourselves stuff like I don't want to hear my voice. You don't want to hear my voice.
I really do.
God doesn't want to hear my voice. But we need to, that's something that we need to overcome. And I think, again, communally as a collection and family, like we can work together at overcoming that. And when we come together to sing, that can be on our mind, like that this is okay. Like we want to hear each other sing. God wants to hear us sing. And however your voice comes out, that's okay. Chris.
I think so. We a lot of times talk about the fact that we don't use instruments in our worship, and I think that's rightly so, based on sort of the Old Testament foreshadowing and the New Testament. But we miss the part of singing and making melody in your heart.
Yes.
So we miss the we use it as a proof point for the reason that we're doing worship the right way, the mechanics of it, which we are, I think, but we miss the whole point at the same time.
Yes, yeah. Because again, we thought we were doing the right thing, but in the process of doing that, we became fixated on a physical mechanic and lost sight of the spiritual activity that we were supposed to be partaking in. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to talk about that one. Well, something I've heard from other, brethren, is when we sing on worship on Sunday, that we sing songs that not many of us know. And so some of them, tell me I feel uncomfortable, especially when they're, new, there's visitors and we don't even know the melody or the song. And so how are we inspiring or helping the visitor feel comfortable in a congregation when the members don't even know the melody to that song?
Right.
I've heard that before, but at the same time, then I feel like, okay, well that's the challenge, right? Because we want to then have more opportunities to learn those new songs, and I would love to have that. At one point we used to do that on Wednesday nights where we would learn new songs. And I love when we used to have our teacher, who's now in the technology department, but he would teach us all the songs on Wednesdays, and I love that. And I guess that's a challenge that I feel that could improve our singing on Sundays when we all come together to learn those new songs, right? So we don't sound so monotonous singing the same repetitive songs. We can be
Right.
more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So there's an aspect of what you were talking about where that is a physical mechanism, and that's practice. I mean, that anybody who does music practices.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a physical mechanism that could help. Yeah, Robert.
And since I've been here, we haven't really done song service where, again, the whole worship or assembly is singing, but I've been involved in those. And that's a beautiful thing too, is it helps you not only learn new songs, but to just spend an entire hour singing together. So.
Excellent. Yeah. And I'll say some of my thoughts about improving at singing. And maybe this will sound like I'm backtracking on some of the things that we just said a moment ago, but if we're saying we're encouraging everybody, it doesn't matter how you sound, sing out. And I believe that's how it should be. However, if you are trying to sing the right pitch and right notes, it does make it harder if you know what the right notes are and you hear somebody else who's not singing the same thing. So things like practice can help mitigate that. But that's a challenge. A challenge for me that I think about as a song leader is, it's no secret, the age demographic of the congregation here is fairly high. And everybody, your voices are not the same. The voices are not the same as they are when you're younger. It becomes harder to sing. And so that's an inherent limitation that exists. There's also, I mean, at various levels of skill or musical knowledge, there's innate talent. Like some people's voices just are nicer than other people's voices. And like, that's just, God's gift to you. And that's not a good or, it's not a bad thing that your voice isn't one way or the other. But these are, I think it's okay to acknowledge that these are challenges and things that we face. So I'll just kind of address this one real quick. This is coming from what I was saying earlier about how I grew up thinking about the mechanics of singing. If I want to improve at singing, I do so mechanically. But to me, that's really a striking difference. Think about those earlier questions. We were talking about worship in general, and we're talking about where our heart's at and our connection to God and each other. And then, okay, well, let's talk about singing. Okay, well, how do I pitch the song better? It's this huge departure from how we think about worship as a whole to, okay, let's talk about singing, let's talk about the mechanics. And so what I want us to be in the mode of thinking singing's not any different from the other forms of other aspects of worship and how we worship God. Like it's a different mode. We're using our voices and music to worship. But the state of our being is the same as if we were praying or in the Lord's Supper. Our connection with each other and with God is the same. So here, this is hitting on some of what we discussed earlier. On the right side, there's worship in English. The top right is the word used in Hebrew, and then the one on the bottom is the word in Greek. Don't need to know those, other than the point is, you look up those definitions for any of those, they all encompass the same ideas, the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration. And I think this is what Peter was hitting on, talking about your outseeing nature. You're thinking about how miraculous it is that the sun comes up every day, food is provided every season, and you allow yourself to be in a state of awe. That's part of that reverence and that adoration. That's what worship is, and it doesn't matter what mode of worship you're in. This is where your heart and mind need to be, is that feeling or expression of reverence. I had two verses, Leviticus 26, the to bow down, that's the word that's also translated as worship. But it's that physical expression. You're placing yourself physically in a state of reverence and adoration to assist your emotional state. And then I think that John 4:23-24, this is what ultimately we should all be shooting for, all the time for our worship, is to be true worshipers, remembering that God is spirit and that our worship must be in spirit and truth. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit now, and we're going to talk more about the interconnection between the spiritual and the physical. So we've had some comments related to that, but generally speaking, can the physical help us to worship in spirit when we sing? And in what ways would you say that it does? Tony?
So the physical songs we pick, if they're meaningful words, and we're singing them in such a way to encourage one another and to teach one another, that would resonate. It's a physical thing. We choose songs that are really meaningful. And I like when the song leader kind of sets that up for us, helps us to know what we're going to really concentrate on this in this song. Just helps get your mind right.
Good. Cole?
If we think about scriptures and we think about Psalms, those are really beautiful, and they bring a lot of emotion to what we're reading because of the language they use. So the language that's used in songs, the tone and the pitch that's kind of in conjunction with that really allow those words to flourish.
Great, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart when I think about picking songs, is setting, because that previous slide, as a song leader, and I'm thinking about leading the group as a collective, you want to promote this state of, and you want to promote the act of feeling reverence and adoration towards God. And so you can use these physical things of the words and the music to help everyone in the group towards feeling that reverence and adoration. Chris.
He didn't say reading and making melody in your heart, right? I mean, so he had a purpose for singing. I mean, the song is definitely it. So there's a physical component that God wants us to be using our voices in melody, in song, and I think that's so the physical components of that, the practice that's been talked about, the thought that whatever it is, whatever the best is for me, that's what I'm going to give. And if the best is here, who cares? But you should have a desire, because he's asked you to sing. He hasn't just asked you to read, or he hasn't asked you to just listen.
Yeah.
Singing brings out emotion and reverence, and all this is emotion. God is love, is emotion, and you got something bothering you, it's going to come out when you're singing, and it's like, I need a Kleenex. It's just He wants to connect our hearts to our words.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really neat point to that God is love. Like that is, we are told that love is an emotion. And music versus, you can read the Psalms that were originally set to music, and we can get value out of them. So, and the rest of the Bible is prose. But God also gives us another avenue, and there's that singing is special in that it really helps us make that emotional connection. You can achieve emotional connection through reading and through talking and like prayer, but music is a tool. Maybe isn't the right word, but it does assist us in channeling emotion. And so if we're trying to be in a state of reverence and adoration, let's use music to help us do that. So with that said, do things like pitch, tempo, or musical skill and ability, how do those fit into this picture? Do they matter still?
Yeah, some of us aren't the best singers, but Chris, Desiree, we've all said, he wants you to do the best. That's part of our worship, so he doesn't want you to do it flat. Do it to your best ability. Think of the words. If you don't know the words, there's a lot of words I don't know in these songs, and I go to Kendrick, what does that mean? Because I feel like if I'm just saying the words, I'm doing some main worship there. You know what I mean? So we need to know the words, and yet sing to our best ability, because that's what we're doing. We're praising God. Now, as a song leader, maybe not choose songs that none of us know through the whole worship service. And if there's visitors, introduce hey, this is a new song for us to let everybody know this is why we're struggling or something like that. You know what I mean? But and then, like I say, I like when you get up there, a lot of times you say, hey, I picked this song because we're going to be partaking in the Lord's Supper. And here, can you explain it?
Okay. That's good feedback to know that that's helpful. Good. Peter.
Do things like pitch, tempo, and musical skill matter? Let me ask the question differently. When you go to the dentist, does his skill at giving that aesthetic, at soothing you, at doing a good job matter? If those things matter to us in the physical realm, why doesn't it matter when we worship Jehovah? and to strive to be on tempo, to be correct and worshipful of what we're presenting. This is worship, isn't it? So why does it rate any less than anything else?
That's a really interesting analogy, and I like that, Chris.
Well, so I mean, I look at that and I go, yes, 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 but.
Yeah,
And
that's what I thought too.
And here's why. Pitch and tempo absolutely do matter. The musical skill, we all have different levels and different types of skills, but that's why we have song leaders. That's why we have song leaders up there, is because I think they have a certain level of skill to control pitch and tempo. And I do think that they're part of being that in that role is helping us worship. I mean, you're not up there to show off. You're up there to help the worship. And so things like pitch and tempo for you absolutely do matter to help us have pitch and tempo. And it's your musical skill that helps us in whatever musical skill we have. Praise God.
I've been present in situations where the song leader's hands are going all over the place, not according to tempo. And I asked myself, why is that individual leading song? Why don't we want skilled people in those positions, as we do from a preacher, from an elder, or anybody else? I don't see the reason for, just because a person is willing to do it, let him do it because it's some kind of a service to God. If you're not doing it properly, how are you exalting God?
Right.
I mean, I've seen hands moving all over the place, totally irrelevant to the tempo.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that too. I've done that. Yeah. So there is an element of doing your best there too, just like everybody else. But I also think this is kind of a soapbox of mine is I think that we call this role that we've made up a song leader. What is a song leader doing? Like, are you leading? Like, do when we call upon people to lead songs, is what you're doing actually leading the group? And I would argue, like, if you're woefully underprepared and don't know what you're doing at all, like, you're not going to be capable of leading the group. I mean, of course, you need to be given opportunity and have the patience and grace of the group, working with you with those things. But I think that we ask, we kind of treat singing and song leading in this different category. Like you just need to get up and start the song for everybody, but that's not leading. So that was kind of me going off on that. But so in your minds, again, thinking about like these first things that come to mind, what do you think a song leader does? Especially I want to hear from those of you who aren't song leaders. What do you think the song leader should be doing? Yeah.
I you need to know music, right? That's one thing. And the reason I say that is because I worship also in Spanish when I go to Texas.
Okay.
And I can compare because I know my melody in English. You come here and you have a tempo. But my brother, when they lead in Spanish, is very strong. And boy, that's my challenge when I worship in the Spanish congregation, because I need to set my mind when am I singing to God, and I struggle because I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so, how many more do I have to sing? Like how many verses? So my mind just goes into this idea where I'm not worshiping anymore. Right? So yes, I think a song leader should know music, should know tempo, but at the same time, I need to know, as a person, my personal growth is I need to set my mind on God and sing with my heart, right?
Right. But it makes it harder.
Yes.
And so that's what I want to, I think that's an aspect of that I want us to be thinking about is like, why are we doing things to ourselves to make our worship more difficult? Like if there are physical mechanisms that we can, our things that we could practice or improve upon, encourage us to embrace those things if they're helping us worship better. If they're helping us worship in spirit better, let's do that. But a second thing, kind of as a little bit of an aside, but you mentioned worshiping at another congregation somewhere else. And so I wanted to come back to that. I mentioned right at the beginning, we're talking about us here. Not that it was bad that you brought up another congregation, but we can't hold other congregations to the same standards that we would have here. Like, we have people with some musical ability here. So let's use the talents that we have. But you can't go to another congregation and then cast these judgments upon them without, you don't know what their musical talents are or anything like that. So again, the goal is not so that we're not discussing this so we can go point fingers at people in other congregations and things like that. But we're talking about us here and what we can do better. Cole?
I want Peter to go first because I am a song leader. So
Yeah.
Peter has something. Peter, do you have
Yeah.
something?
You can go ahead and go.
Me?
Yeah.
The thought came to mind in the Old Testament, God would not accept a blemished sacrifice, you see. And so if we deliver less than our best, whatever we do, isn't that the same thing as delivering a blemished lamb to him? Whatever it may be, whether it be, if I'm not qualified to be a preacher, I'm not going to stand up there and try to do it, knowing that I'm not good at it. If I'm not an adequate song leader, I will not be up there doing that either. I may be qualified to work man to man with somebody else, or personally, I'll do that. So you see, what I'm getting at is, I think that all of us need to strive to offer God the best of what we can in the worship. Otherwise, do something else.
Robert?
So, hopefully I can say this. When I was in high school, I had my choir teacher tell me to lip sync because, again, obviously, maybe he wasn't the greatest teacher. I don't know. Now, when I became a Christian, again, I was instructed by the evangelist there that, you need to learn to sing and you need to be a song leader. So I was learning how to read notes and whatnot with, 10, I don't know how old was
8 to 10 years old.
8 to 10 years old, and trying to, again, gain some proficiency. So, again, I did lead singing. I probably wasn't very good at it because I think I'm still off key, can't hit the pitch right or get the right starting note, whatever. But with that said, I've also gone to small congregations where, there was nobody that had the courage to step up and lead singing, and I, as a visitor, am leading singing for those that were there. So,
Yep.
You do the best you can as long as it's from the heart.
That's the
And-
exception. That's an exception,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So I'm
Yeah.
thankful
So-
that we have
Right.
individuals like yourself and Cole and Steve.
So I appreciate you bringing up that side of things, because I've been in the same situation. I'll go back when I was in college. They didn't think that I heard them, but the couple that sat in front of me that were proficient singers, for a long, like a year or something. One Sunday morning, I heard them after the service, talking to each other, discussing that they're going to go sit on the other side of the building. Because of my singing, because I was that bad. I've improved it significantly since then because I've worked really hard at it. But so I was doing my best, but it wasn't good. But then from there, went to congregations that were very small, where there's nobody else that wanted to lead singing or was willing to. So again, that's what kind of goes back to why I was saying, like, us here, there's no need to twist Robert's arm to get up here and lead singing, because we have other people who are happy to do it and have, talent at it. So I think that's appropriate for us. But you can go to another congregation that has 10 people, and like you said, it might be the right thing for you to do in that case. So there's some situational there for sure. Cole.
Yeah, so for me as a song leader, personally what I think that I'm doing is I'm really setting the tone for everything that's going to happen throughout the service. And I think that starts even when I'm preparing my songs and choosing the right songs, then set the tone. Doesn't necessarily need to be like a specific topic for that Sunday based off the lesson, but something as simple as having only women sing part of How Deep the Father's Love, right? It really puts emphasis on those words when you make that little change or lead that change. And I think every guy in here can admit that when that part happens, it's still beautiful, even if you're not singing and being a part of it.
Right.
So kind of making those changes between encouraging everybody to sing loud and then sometimes encouraging like specific groups to sing loud to really set that tone.
Yeah, Chris.
But you guys have a very important job because and I guess, but you set the tenor for the congregation, right? You do. You said that it is the most emotional part of our service in terms of how we express ourselves to God collectively. And you guys are responsible for helping us do that the best we can with God and the Spirit here with us. Big job.
Yeah. I agree. Peter. Go ahead, Peter.
Who, me?
Yeah, Peter.
Well, sometimes I think that the song leaders are the song followers, because when they start a certain tempo, and then they allow the congregation to slow it down, and make a dirge out of it, then they're not leading anymore. Cole does an excellent job. He maintains the tempo, other people do, Steve. But some song leaders allow it to deteriorate. I think we can pay attention to that.
Okay, yeah, and that's a good point. I will say, that's very difficult. If the congregation is slowing things down, it's very hard as one person to get everybody doing it. But I do agree. You're absolutely right. So okay, we got more. I don't know which of you were first. Steve, go ahead. Oh, Arlene. Okay. Did you have your hand up too?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. You go ahead.
You're doing a good job. There's a lot of us that don't sing as well as we used to. But with a song leader, we can harmonize a little,
Yeah.
but we're forgetting something. This is a song to the Lord, not to anybody else. We do the best we can with it.
Yeah.
And He loves it. So we shouldn't worry about, well, it didn't sound very good today. Well, I'm probably coming down with a cold.
Right.
Or
The pollen count is high, and it makes it hard to sing right
all
now.
of these things. No, keep on doing what you're doing. You're doing fine.
Okay.
And so's the congregation.
Yes. Yeah. Jim.
As a song leader, yeah, you are doing good. Arlene's right. But what Chris said is, back at the beginning of this class, it is a very important thing that we're doing as our singing as part of our worship service, okay? And you are setting the tempo. There'd be nothing wrong. I love how you introduce your songs. This is what we're doing, why I picked this song. Some of us come here, some of us are tired in the morning, blah, blah, and it's very easy for us to go through the motion.
Yeah.
We can sing some words we don't even know. That's no good. Even as a reminder, once a month, whatever it is, a song leader can take the time, a minute, to explain what we're doing as a reminder. Because we could go through a year's worth of worship service and never be reminded why we are singing praises to the Lord. He wants to hear, He is the audience. Okay? Not us.
Yeah.
So that to me, if you took the time to do that every so often to get our minds in the right spot before we go through the motions, that would
I really like that, and I think it's inherently hard, like, especially, I think because of how we place ourselves. Like, the song leader stands up here, and you guys stand out there. Like, that's an audience. That's every other setting, you know, music venue or something, you created an audience, you have somebody performing, you have an audience. That's just the way our culture is. So I like that. I think that's something I want to try to remember, just that, a quick reminder, like, God is the audience. Like, we, you know, I may be the leader, or, you know, somebody else is the leader, but we together are worshiping God, there's not some sort of disjointedness. And I think, so that's what I was getting at with this question, is there interaction between the singers and song leaders? I think obviously, yeah, we've just been talking about that. But, like, the song leaders face you guys because you need to hear each other. But, like, really, like, we're all together worshiping God. And the interaction is, like, that emotional connection. Like, we are collectively in a state of worship. That's where our hearts are. We talked a little bit about, we're running short on time, so talk some about how song leaders might lead better. And I really like to hear feedback about non-song leaders' thoughts on what song leaders are doing. Again, my background, I grew up, like every congregation I go to, there'd be young men's training classes. And in these young men's training classes, you would learn how to do things, lead in worship, various ways in worship, including song leading. But it feels it feels kind of weird to me, because here you're teaching these people to how to lead singing, but then you come up before a congregation and you start leading singing. Nobody explained to the congregation what the song leader is doing. You know, those of you that, you know, aren't song leaders, I don't know if you know what's happening when we're, you know, beating time, or like what that means, what we're doing. Things like Cole was talking about, like the song leader asks you to, you know, women please only sing, you know, the first verse, and, you know, men stay silent. Like, what does that mean? Chris.
Like when you're
Yeah.
quiet, right?
Yeah.
Those are mechanics. You guys are. We get this when we see people play music. You're a conductor.
Yeah.
Right. That's really what you are. You're every bit of part of the group that's doing the expression. You've just got your role.
Yes. Yeah.
But you're right. I don't think a lot of people realize that they're looking here, right? Really, what you need to be doing is kind of looking here, because there's going to be times where this is going to, and some of the times it's noted in the song, sometimes it's not. The song leader is the conductor. He's the one in control of that.
Yes.
And the point is to make it an emotional part of the service. And so when you know, when you're bursting something out, when it's like, no, this needs to be,
Yeah.
this needs to be quiet.
Yeah. So personally, that's something I've been working on, trying to incorporate more volume, like how quiet or loud, or tempo changes within the song. Like typically how we sing is we sing at one volume the whole entire song, and we sing at one speed the entire song. But changing how loud you sing certain parts of it, or how quick you sing certain parts of it, or slow it down, that affects the emotional tone of what you're singing. Again, as a song leader, that's something that I think about. And that's something I've been practicing on doing more of, but that means that the congregation has to know what I'm doing and be trying to follow along. And so you can verbally state that beforehand, but there are the body language that the song leaders use is also being used to communicate that. But that, again, that's as part of the engagement that is occurring. But I think, you know, I was thinking about Cole's talking about, you know, how deep the Father's love. He asks the group to, for women to only be the only part singing a section of it. Like what, as the congregation, what is going through your minds when Cole asks, like, all right, women, I just want you to sing the first verse. We should be, what I'd encourage us to do is, we're trusting Cole that he was thinking this through and he didn't just arbitrarily decide, like, I think women sing nice, so, like, it'd just be pretty to have them sing the first verse, just because I feel like it. No, we should be hopefully trusting the song leader, like, oh, he's asking the women to sing, to only be the singers for the first verse. Like, okay, he wants us to, use that tonal element of just the women singing. That's part of his broader vision for the singing song service to help our worship. So like everything the song leader is doing should be going back towards God is the audience, God is the purpose of this worship, and the songs are supposed to promote our state of reverence and adoration, place ourselves in a state of worship. So any choices the song leader is asking you to do, hopefully, if the song leader is leading well, all of his choices will help the congregation do that. But I think as a song leader, I just encourage everybody, like, I want this engagement. Like, I want you to be engaged with me. I want to be engaged with you, because together we are going, like, everything is going to God. So we're wrapping up, but the song leader only leading mechanical aspects of worship, no, I think we addressed that. The song leader, yes, addresses mechanical aspects of worship, but it's in conjunction to support the spiritual worship that's occurring. And then maybe this is, it's time to wrap up class, but maybe something for you to think about. Thinking about our discussion tonight, what are things you'd like to work on regarding our worship of God through singing? And so the goal, like I said at the beginning, we're trying to improve as worshipers. Are there things that you can see? I think, Jim, you had mentioned, like, are each of us individually trying to do our best? Like, it doesn't matter if you're a good singer or not. Are you doing the best you can? And I think Daryl's talked about our lives as Christians as a whole, that God is looking at. Are we actively progressing? Are we actively growing as his children, or are we stagnant? And this is just a small, singing as worship is just a small snippet of that. But I encourage us, like, to reflect on that and think about, like, am I doing the best I can? Is there something I can do better? And then, connected with that, are there things that you think the congregation, like, as communally then, when we worship together, is there something we could be doing better? And it's okay to talk about that. It's not, nothing to hide. It doesn't have to be mean or harsh. If you want to tell me after a song leading service that something was difficult or confusing or something, that's fine. And I think we should be able to have those conversations, because our goal is to worship God. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the discussions. Have a good evening.